Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
Welcome to a very special edition of Nerd Initiative's Turn a Page, the comic book club for Nerd Initiative. I am your host. My name is Ken M. I'm the host of the OD Page podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative's comics editor-in-chief. To my right, your left, I let him do his intro.
We're doing a reverse, but coming at you live and direct straight from a folding chair in the ODPH studios. My name is Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. As always, it's a pleasure.
And joining us, assistant editor of Nerd Initiative Comics, the one and only Marty Stoked. Marty, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here.
And when we do special editions like this, we mean it because there is a comic that is out right now from Image Comics that is absolutely mind-blowing, from the crazy artwork that is in there because the imagery will just blow you away, to the story that is really coming across to some as a horror book, but really it's all about family. And we are very fortunate enough to have the creative team behind it joining us today. First off, a WGA nominated writer that's making one hell of an impression with this book. Welcome to the show, NOAH GARDNER. Noah, what's going on?
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
Joining us as well is a writer that is a friend of the show, arguably the only Miami Dolphins fan I can ever talk football with, but you know his work in the comic realm from Power Rangers and Rogue Sun from the Massiveverse. Please welcome back to the show, the one and only Ryan Parrott. Ryan, what's going on?
Man, it's a pleasure, even with that devastating intro.
Well, we had to bring it up. I was getting DM'd from other people at Nerd Initiative, like, you got to mention about football on here. I'm like, okay, I'll just make one quick reference and we'll be done. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll lick my wounds later. Yeah.
And last but certainly not least, an artist whose work is absolutely breathtaking, no matter where you catch it, if it's in blue and green, razor blades, or Department of Truth. Please welcome to the show the one and only John J Pearson. John, what's happening?
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you all for coming on the show. And like we said, this book that we're going to be talking about is one that you should have had picked up on Valentine's Day, because it is truly a gift that just keeps on giving no matter what, because it's all the story about one Abraham Morganson and his family. And the story behind it is just, like we say, it's so complex. It's horror, it's family, it's action. It is so much involved, and that is the Infernals. So gentlemen, how did this whole story and series come to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it all goes back to Ryan and together. When we were younger than we are now, when we were assistants at a production company, and we had always wanted to collaborate on something. We worked on a feature script, on a movie script, probably a few years ago. And when Ryan sort of getting a foothold in comics, I would just keep pestering him, saying like, "Hey, dude, we got to find a comic." Like I'm just starting to the meat. I was getting some lot of comics for adaptation. I was falling in love with all this shit that was being done. I just like I just kind of want to try my hand at it. And so I would Ryan lists of various ideas for comics that I thought would be cool, and he didn't think any of them would be cool.
That's not entirely.
I say this in part for effect, but we would go back and forth, and we were just trying to find the idea that we would sort of like lock into, that we wanted to keep about. And I've always found that kind of when I'm searching for new ideas, I like to go back to these archetypes that have always been interesting to me. And you know, I was always fascinated by this conception of the Antichrist as a child. And I like to kind of go archetype and then think about a spin that I haven't seen on it, see a character at a different stage in their life or from a different perspective. I went to Ryan Simple as like, I think I just said, hey, what if the Antichrist was dying? Like, what if it was the end of his life? Immediately, we just this mythology in this story, and that's sort of how you know it's going to be something worthwhile, is when you want to return chatting about it. And so that was kind of the genesis of the concept, at least.
Yeah, I would know, like, Noah. They were all good ideas you said. I mean, I've gone back and looked at them. I was wrong. There were good ideas. There's 20 good ideas for comics in there. But this was like a hit that I was like, can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah. I was like, where the fuck has this been? Like, that was like my first reaction. I was like, this is the best site ever. I I love this so much. So like, it was really fun when it came across because I think I had other projects I was working on at the time, and then it basically was the only thing I wanted to work, like kind of pushed to the side for a little while, that's exactly how you know it's something you want to see. And I thought what I liked about it so much was just like, it felt like an idea that when you read it, we seen this before, right? Like this has to have already been out there. And I'm sure there's some version of it out there or some like, but this was the one that I thought, oh my gosh, it really, when we brought the idea of children and the succession element, all of it, and this idea that it could be sort of about sort of parents and their children, his perspective to his relationship with his relationship to his children. And when you started seeing parallels that way, and then we knew we could actually use like the supernatural as a way to be for all the crazy shit in your family, that's when it was just like, it got easier and easier and easier to sort of see the whole story. And that's when I was like, oh man, this is going to be too much fun to do.
Oh, absolutely.
So if everybody's always down here, especially because this is one of them special editions, how can you give a nice brief synopsis to those who have not, which we don't understand why, picked up this book yet?
I mean, I think the quickest synopsis would be that it's a story about an aging Antichrist who has, over the course of his life, created this massive criminal empire, all in service of, accomplishing his sort of the task he's been born with, which is to bring about the end of the world. And at the end of his life, he's sort of upon his inability to have done the thing that his father put him on earth to do. And he's sort of grappling with that kind of existential crisis about his own abilities as a man and as a son. And simultaneously, he's figuring out sort of the practical problem of which of his children, all of whom are sort of troubled in their own way, having grown up in this environment, which of his he's going to saddle with the kind of horrifying responsibility, but in this family, the sort of honor of carrying out and ending the world. And so it's a story about his existential crisis. It's a story about the kids' existential crises, and this sort of inter-family conflict arising out of the Antichrist's impending.
Right there.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Questions for you. We had Michael on earlier, and we heard from him that this was kind of your first comic book that you've ever written. Talk to us about your experience in creating it with this team of seasoned veterans and what that was all like.
Yeah, I mean, I was incredibly fortunate to have these seasoned veterans, right? I don't know what it would look like if I didn't, but it's been a really rewarding experience creatively, and in other ways. It's just this story. I do love the medium. It's something I've kind of I didn't really grow up with comics, and I came to them later. And I already had my career as a screenwriter, so I was kind of always coming at it. When I came to comics, I was really trying to understand the craft of it. I was really trying to understand how you put something like this together, and how I could that I've developed in my career to this medium. And so I'm fortunate enough that some overlap there, just in terms of how you're structuring scenes. I mean, there's certainly continuity in terms of just the basic principles of telling and generating tension. It's been a learning experience in terms of, I've said it before, but comics really is a medium where it's about what you're not saying as much as what you are saying, and it's about what you sort of interplay between dialogue and imagery in a way that not a lot of mediums are. Figuring out the rhythm of a scene and figuring out how quickly you need to be getting into sort of the next piece of information. If I was left to my vices, there'd be a much more bored, right? So that was why having veterans or a sort of steady hand like Ryan and John and have to be like, showing me how things needed to move and how the rhythm needed to adjust was, a sense. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been anything like what it is now.
So I kind of have to ask, you mentioned, the art and with Ryan helping writing,
Sure.
When it comes to the art, because geez Louise, holy crap, the art is incredible in this book. book, and it's amazing. It looks like there's like old school art with the amount of detailed line work. So John, I need to know two things. Like, did these guys give you on a scene, and how are you drawing it? Are you drawing it digitally? Because it doesn't look digital. It looks like you're drawing it on a paper almost, because you can see all of the intricacies in the lines and the shading, and it's a thing of beauty.
First of all, thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say. I mean, I think with the scripts, Ryan and Noah have kind of perfect balance by giving the correct level of direction, and I think they give real cinema in the script, but they do give me enough leeway where I can play and I can kind of the words that they're kind of giving through the dialogue and narration. Which is my sweet spot. I really like emotive storytelling, and I like things will convey a deeper sense and a deeper feeling through the images rather than it just being purely illustrative. So yeah, it's so I think some of the stuff I know in the first issue, especially, there was a lot of film references. Say we envision it like this, but then other bits it was a lot looser. Especially some of the splash pages in the first issue where it was we have these demons from across different cultures, and then just let me run with it, which is absolutely sensational. So yeah, so a lot of fun with this. And the process, it's kind of a mixture of digital and traditional. With this, it's probably more digital, purely because of time frames. If I had the time, I would do it all traditionally, but it's just the case with. But I'm a sucker for that painterly, kind of really tactile feel. I come from a fine art back, like the feel of things, and I feel like a lot of texture can actually communicate more than something that's just flat. I feel like that importance of the visuals than the more kind of figurative elements. So yeah, even though a lot of it is digital, I try and replicate that feel and that texture to it.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to have it come across that way, being mostly a digital medium with what you're doing. I thought it was like old school, the old school books with DC and Marvel, where they have all of the intricate line work and shading, just awesome, especially with the character designs that you guys are creating. It's just insane. You guys are pulling this stuff. Ryan, one follow-up question to you, because I'm so used to reading Rogue Sun, Rangers, Massiverse stuff. This is very different than what I've traditionally seen you do, and I know well what writing kind of in a different medium been, or how has that been? Has that stretched you, or is this something that you've done or want to get into more?
Yeah, it's been different stuff. What do you mean? Exactly like Power Rangers? Yeah, actually, I think it was an interview we did a few weeks ago. Somebody said it, and my buddy said, he goes, "This is your showgirls," and and then that idea of like I'm trying to break outside of I'm Elizabeth Berkley, and I'm trying to break free of my what people give me. But no, it was a lot of fun. It's been I've done horror stuff in the past before, like Dead's pretty dark in some spots, but this is the one, I think the first one where I was like, oh yeah, we can swear and actually like really dig some dark things, and it's been pretty helpful, and like let's push it a little farther, let's go a little bit more, let's see if we can do that. And so I enjoy that part. I think it's fun to try, and like the thing that's doing this book in general was like you go in with the idea and it's going to be dark because you're doing stuff with the religion, Antichrist, and all that stuff, but like they'll light it up, and then when John put the art, all of a sudden it was like, oh okay, that's what this book is. Like it's like it really doesn't become anything more. It's sort of like in your head, and then once the script movie's like, then all of a sudden you go, okay, that's who that character is, that's what they look like, that's how they're going to talk, and then you adjust accordingly. So the fun part was that first draft of the first script, and then like I think we wrote the second draft, and then we got the first art on issue 1, and then it made us go back and rework some of it too, because everybody sounded a little bit different, everybody looked, so that part has been really fun. Because, like you said, when you work with Rogue Sun and when I work with Power Rangers, those characters are established, those worlds are established. I already know what that stuff's going to be when I sit down to write it the first time. But this is a little bit more of a back and forth, which is and fun and more collaborative.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's really
nice wall, by the way. I love your wall, by the way. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I got a couple of things. I've got it's my part of my massive verse wall. You can kind of see. Yeah, my wife hates it. My wife hates it. She put a limit to that I'm allowed on my wall. I had to move some stuff into the basement, but whatever keeps the wife happy.
That's fair enough. So when dealing with issue 1, and when you finally completed it, was there a moment, because obviously there's so many elements involved here with Abe and his kids, was there any point that you, after you got done with it, you're like, did we take this too far? Or is it one thing with writing a story that's this dark is like there's really no off limits to where you could go?
Well, I don't know if there was a conversation about a particular scene that I think we're like, do we really want to set that higher? And I think that was, like maybe we don't want to go there, but ultimately, it's this. I don't want to go on a rant here, but I won't. But like, there's this thing of like,
no,
really
do it. We love.
Yeah.
No, give it. Come on.
This would be my JJ Reddick.
Yeah,
it'll be great. No,
that's all right. Someone get a soapbox, please.
There we go. But it's interesting how like okay, this is like I've had people talk about Rogue Sun and they're like, oh, asshole, and I'm like, okay, is he compared to the Joker? Is he an asshole? Like, because like he saves people's lives, but because he uses like foul language, people think he's an asshole, and so I've always been like dealing with that concept of like unlikable main characters. I enjoy unlikable main characters. I enjoy people you can't quite peg, and that over the course of a story people grow and change, because I like that stuff. So when we sat down to do this, like we talked a lot about like, do we need these characters to be likable? How do we do that? And I think we came around the idea that it's not that they need to be likable, they just need to be relatable. We need to understand who they are, what they do, and what. And so I feel like when we found, there wasn't anything that was sort of off limits. It was just going, if we do go far, if we do have people do things, we have to be understanding that it may arc them in a different direction. So
we also, no, I think it became, it was always the sort of thematic through line that everybody in this book, whether they were on the side of the good or the bad or in whatever it was, everybody was going to be flawed. Like we were going to see the sort of grotesqueries and weirdness of humanity writ large just kind of splashed all pages. And that was something that, to talk just about how John's arms the book, like even in the most mundane scenes, it has this kind of expressive, dangerous intensity. And that kind of encouraged us, or at least, reinforced this notion that across, like in every panel of our book, we're going to see some of the darkness and absurdity of humanity. And I use the word absurdity kind of intentionally because that you can derive from that, right? Like in seeing just the kind of extent to which human beings act in this kind of ugly, counterintuitive, self-destructive way, sometimes sadistic, sometimes masochistic, just troubled, we're all troubled people, in sort of making that a kind of common theme, we can derive a little bit of and that's something that we always wanted to maintain and would help, and we think does offset more intense moments, some of the more scary stuff, some of the more unconscionable things that our characters do. So maintaining that balance has been really essential and has been facilitated largely by the quality and expressionism of his work. We really could not strike that balance without John doing what he does.
I mean, I agree with that. I think it is for like somebody the other day about the first issue. They're like, "Oh, I really like it when you introduce the bad guy," and I was like, "Which one?" Because I mean, obviously, there's no real likable characters in that first issue. They're all but that's great though, because it's like when you're introducing them and you're setting the parameters for what personalities are, it's fantastic because in that you can look at the layering, the nuances, and get to know what they're really like. And for me, that's really interesting. It's like I don't really like the overly nice characters of people that are presented. I don't like heroes because they're fundamentally boring all the time. I like people that are flawed, and I like people that are chaotic, and I like people that are just kind of scum, because there's that part to them where I'm like, that's awesome, I can relate to that. Or I'm like, that's awesome, I'm glad that's not me. So playing with that and thinking about the different nuances within these characters, absolutely something, and just how that can be balanced with the kind of evil setting of them being the spawn of Satan.
Now, with
this is a bad pitch. This is a bad pitch, but like, think about Dudley in Harry Potter. Like, for 5 movies, 6 books, whatever, he's the biggest asshole ever. And then at the end, when he walks up to Harry and he's like, "You're a waste of space to me." It's the greatest moment. It's my favorite moment in all the books. Is the weird moment. Harry's like, "What the fuck?" And like, you get that because you had a bad guy for 5 or 6 books do that cool, fun thing, and you don't get that if everybody's nice.
It's a hell of an exercise, pun intended. It's a really, challenging exercise, but one that we, very intentionally sort of set for ourselves, of starting book where every single one of our characters is doing something. And of course, there's sort of a degree of internal conflict for them. Every single one of them is in a place where they are doing bad things. And the goal is to, over the course of the 5 issues of this first arc, really kind of get to the point where we're actually rooting for them. And it doesn't mean that we're rooting for them to end the world. It doesn't mean that we're rooting for them to, kill or maim or hurt or whatever. It means that we're rooting for them just personally on a character level to resolve whatever, to find whatever sort of looking for, and resolve that internal conflict that is so stark.
With all these characters that you have going on here, exactly who are your personal favorites? This is your baby. Let's be honest. Who's your character that you relate to?
And you want to take that one first?
Who I relate to? Probably the GOAT.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Parrott.
No, I don't mean the greatest of all time. That's Dan Marino. But I just had to throw one in there. I had to try.
I mean, see this? You see that, right?
I know you.
Yeah. You know who actually had the GOAT? Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes.
But
spiraled now. I apologize.
We're here to talk comics, gentlemen.
I know. Sorry, guys. I like Jackal a lot. That I probably enjoy the most, because when we pitched him as Noah said it's this in one of the early things. He's like, he's a shapeshifter with an identity crisis. And I was like, that is the coolest thing. I love that concept. It's so simple. And I remember there was several times in the early time to write him as the good guy, quote unquote. Like, I kept trying to like lean him into like, he's really having a hard time with this. And it was more like, no, he's just somebody who really wants a situation where he's really to be there for his family while also deal with his own sort of internal demons, and really wants to have the attention of his father, for the approval of his father, but doesn't know exactly, but has to do things that he doesn't like to get it. And I was like, yeah, totally relate to that. That sounds, sorry, Dad, I don't mean that in that regards, but I understand that need and that desire, and even if it means you're doing things that you might not necessarily.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think this, or it would be hard for me to say that I relate most, simply because, the stage of life that he's in, but that the degree of sort of internal sort of existential angst that he has, I certainly relate to, and the sort of weight of expectation. I think it's hard to identify with that, but I do think I've increasing kinship with B, the daughter, because, and I've said this before on a podcast, my dad, was 60 years old. So he was really at the sort of like entering the later stages of his life. And as youngest child, it was sort of a blessing and a curse, because I had less time with my dad. I was more sort of detached from him just by virtue of this was, he was not necessarily expected to be a father at this point in his life. But it also gave me a kind of early awareness of mortality, which again, in a like that for a kid to kind of take on and try to process as they're growing up themselves and kind of realizing and encountering the reality, but it also does give you perspective. And I think that's what I love about B, is that even though she's cynical and she's ruthless, like she has this, I think that she has the sort of best understanding of what's going on in the family. She understands things sort of silently in a way that others don't, and we're going to see how that kind of is made manifest as the story goes along. But she really like gets it in a way that her older brothers don't, because they're so sort of like myopically who's going to be in charge and how do I get family and what do I do. And she, just by virtue of the fact that she's so young, is left to just kind of be the observer. I guess I really did some kinship with her there.
I think for me, it's her, which is I never really actually kind of like picked each one like unplanned each one of the kids, but yeah, Nero, just because he's so brash and so chaotic, and he stands out between the two quieter siblings, but in a lot of ways that's just complete overcompensation. And he's it's weird because I think the two seem far more mysterious, but I feel like Nero has maybe more vulnerability and more kind of mystery to him because of this front that's there. And it's I think it's I always find it fascinating when you have these intense characters that are trying to one thing and another. And yeah, Nero is just fantastic, and plus is just so much fun to in the comic. It's like every single panel he's in is just an absolute pleasure to do. He's just insane. It's fantastic. But I feel like he's somebody where I get chance to put with the nuance of his personality and the emotion coming through, because it's all kind of there for show. Like he's kind of hiding in those, or kind of behind the glasses, or kind of being different people. He is just there trying to be something all the time. And I don't think he's really sure what he's trying to be. But yeah, I find that fascinating to play with.
And that's one great thing about this, is there's so many different characters, I mean, amongst the family, especially too with the proposition that's all centered around is with, I guess we'll talk a little bit about spoilers about issue number 1, that Abe is dying and has to pass on his legacy to one of his kids. And it's almost like a question of like who is worthy between Nero, B, and Jackal. And then obviously we get a very great introduction into all three, just like a little peek behind like what they're really about, but not enough giving everything away, which I loved about it. And then when we get to the end of it, we're kind of having a setup where things are going into issue number 2. We had read behind the scenes issue number 2, but can we talk a little bit spoiler free about what to expect with the next issue coming?
Be quiet, Ryan.
Yeah, please. Absolutely. Ryan, go.
Oh, he just said don't do it. 'Cause I'll be the one. So page 1. No.
No, I think in issue 2, what people can, what we're, the thing that we're most excited about with issue 2 is that we're going to switch perspectives, right? And so the POV that we have, the narration that one is all Abe, it's all the patriarch, and that sort of dominates everything. And then in issue 2, it's going to switch to Nero's perspective, and he's the one. And so we're going to start a glimpse behind the curtain of, not just what, this is sort of a recurring theme for us, like not just the saying to his kids behind closed doors as he sends them off on this sort of mission to determine which of them is most capable, and to essentially his family in general is capable of carrying on his life's work. We're going to see these little glimpses of how he's kind of meddling with each of his children and how he's kind of interfering with this, because of course the fucking Antichrist isn't just going to give you a mission and it's going to be exactly what he says it is. We're also going to be seeing the sort of internal monologues of the sort of internal thoughts of the characters and what animates them and what motivates them and things like that. So that's going to be a turn that we're really excited to share with people. But in terms of the plot, the second issue is going to follow the the sort of three kids on the sort of beginnings of their mission, which is to go to city and to essentially turn a guy who is really good, this sort of force of him to the side of evil. So we're going to see how they kind of bumble their way through that mission and try to figure it out. And it may or may not go as end, and there may or may not be a couple wrinkles in there. But that's all going to be done sort of through Nero's perspective. And then with Abe, a past is going to show up and come at home as well. So just as he is sort of in the throes of dying, and right when he's should be trying to find some kind of peace and humanity and reflection, a really kind of sinister character from his past is going to show up and upend the whole thing. So that's plot-wise, I think, largely what we're working with. And then there's also introduced in the first issue, we're going to see how they are going to stick around and maybe upend Abe's plans in a different way too. Yeah. Too much, too little. Brian?
I thought it was
that was great.
All right, good.
Danced around some stuff there big time, but the character guys continue to get better and better and better, from the first issue to the second. And the stuff that you can, I would say, lay out why, like, you can tell there's a cinematic like take on it. Noah, with you saying you have that background, you can definitely see that as you read. And John's looking of the art and the way that things are laid out in issue 1 and issue 2 definitely flow that way. They speed up the perfect pacing too, with speeding up into some of the stuff and to hit you with those moments that are hilarious. And that's kind of what I love about this. Like, there's a lot of dark humor where you can but just like sit back and laugh your ass off when certain things happen. And it's great adult comic, which I really enjoy. It's not one I'm going to be reading with my daughter at night, but this is kind of one for the
look. I love the idea of you bring a kid and be like, and that's when Nero said, "Fuck this, let's build another line." And
yeah.
It's like, oh,
What's the
God.
line, Daddy?
Yeah. Definitely not one for the kids, but it's incredible. Circling back a little bit to the characters, if you could pick any character to take over Abe's anyone, who would it be and why?
I mean, that's a good. Who would I want to end the world?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that Abe, it's kind of a throwaway in the first, or it's meant to be kind of buried in the first issue. But he tells Sam that he wishes Sam could take over, and my choice as well. I mean, Sam, because the sort of task at hand is so utterly unfathomable. The only person who really seems to have his head wrapped, or like who can conceive of this and what it is, and maintain composure in the face of all of the horror of humanity is, paradoxically this go. So I would choose Sam to take over for it.
I just
right.
It never hit me that I realized we're just like, hey, who's gonna take over the family business and stand the love of God? It's not gonna be my evil headed companion over here. You're by far the best option. What a setup for like, geez, who are these kids? That's funny. I actually agree. That would be weirdly enough, is like the most fun. Like it's weird. Like he came through. I think it's when you write an ensemble book, it's kind of like a table where like each character is like the bottom, and if you feel the story starting to like turn, he'll build another sort of prop up that side. And I think Abe kind of became somebody called him Goat Alfred at one point, and I thought that was a really good way. But like the one that Abe can be honest about, has a familiar, it's the only father figure he's ever had in his life. Like, it's weird that like, I love that character. Like the only human connection he has is with a goat. And I thought that was kind of fun. But yeah, by far the most. It's good plans for him. Yeah.
We've said it a lot, but this is a book that is kind of defined by its, and again, just to highlight John's artistic style, because I think his, art emphasizes this. This is a book about like contrast and contradiction and, what that means for the human condition. And so I think it's really fun that we're talking about just the most capable human here? And the answer is men. Well, at the same, we're asking of them and why we would sort of entrust them with a massive operation as end the world. Is this sort of just like always these sort of layers of contradiction and contrast, again highlighted by John's capacity to do things that are like huge and sweeping and epic, but also deeply intimate and both like very dark but also very emotional. So yeah, it's a really interesting question, and kind of I think speaks to some of these core themes that we've been trying.
I agree as well. I think it would have to be Sam. There's no other option for anybody else.
One will not be Sam.
Thank you.
Or it could be Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like in that first issue as well, he's ironically the most human character out of everybody that's presented. And yeah, you got up.
The last thing I'll say on that is just like, the question is always begged, like, why does the devil send his son, this flawed, vulnerable human being, to do the job of the devil, right? On Earth, why does he send this sort of, this flawed kind of messenger? And I think we've talked about before, but this idea that like a quick apocalypse is not what Satan is after. Maybe what he's after is just this kind of constant cycle of strife and infighting, and maybe that in and of itself is sort of apocalyptic and is the apocalypse. And whose quote is it? Like hell is that Sartre? Is it from No Exit? The hell is other people. Is that right? I don't know. Anyway, that's something that we've talked about a lot, is just Abe even says it in the second episode. He says, am I dead yet? There's a conflict, a sort of internal family conflict that's going on. And he asks Sam, am I dead yet? And Sam says, no, you're not. And he goes, well, shit, I thought this was hell. And it's like, that is something we really want to explore, is like, who hell is this
family
fight? It is family, and it is sort of humanity, and all these other forces be damned.
Yeah, because that's one thing to really take away from it too, is just like, it's not so much of like the post-apocalyptic feel that's going on, but it's really the family power struggle. And that's one thing that shines through, especially John, with your art too, because you really capture the moments that are in, because once Abe divulges about what's going on, you see Nero, who's been more or less unhinged for the first episode, like really kind of come back down to earth for like a brief second. Talk to us a little bit about like the emotional journeys of the characters. Like when you're presenting this on page, like what is the biggest challenge about trying to like endear them to the audience with everything going on with all their emotions?
From a visual point of view, I mean, it's a tricky one. I mean that's the challenge. That's the thing that's probably like one of the most enjoyable things about anything I do, is how can you make that connection with any character. But I think with these characters, that challenge is a little, I guess, fundamentally at first they should be unlikable people because they're the spawn of Satan. But I think for me, from a kind of craft point of view, all about those little ins and the nuances and the body language of when they're talking to each other or what they're doing. And they might be one thing, but there's that other layer through their gestures or through their actions. And it's just like when you're talking to any life, there's like what's that thing where people say it's like the number of lies that you say is like everybody's always kind of telling to some extent. And there's that lack of truth, I think, that we all have when we communicate, but through our body language and our gestures, it kind of betrays that a little bit. So that's the thing that I really like when there's kind of people talking. And I know like that's normally the thing that everybody hates when it's just talking page after page, but that's what I love, is like, that's how can you make that really interesting and that really engaging and connecting to people.
Actually, John, to give John an example of what John did to give characterization to for Jackal, we didn't really have, we had maybe some different takes on go with sort of like the formless, like the shaved head, very clean cut thing. But the sunglasses, when he takes the sunglasses for the wearied look under the owl John, that was something. And it's really funny though. That was something that I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, that's a really way to show the goal of the shifting and the job that he's taken. And it's such a great, the glasses covering up the weariness of the eyes and making him look this. That's such a great way to encapsulate the character, and that all came from John. That was all him.
Well, because like it's very from me that two out of the siblings you can't see their eyes, but for those two it's very different reasons. So you have Jack, it's these kind of mirrored, he's a shapeshifter, and it's like I think the eyes are the thing that communicates most of all to anybody. So it's that kind of out reflection where it's kind of other people seeing themselves, whereas with B it's the opposite. It's out to it. So I think for me, like those two things are like huge parts of the visual sense. People almost distrust them because you can't quite see what's happening, but in two kind of parallel ways. And then you have where the body language is so over the top and so intense to kind of balance out all three of them.
That was a great question.
I don't know if this was intentional or not, but Jackal it really comes through in the second issue. He has like this, what appears to be a scar, or maybe just the way the shading is on the side of his lip. And when I was reading through it, I was taken off by it, not besides the glasses, but I was looking, I was like, is there something going on with his face? And is that going to potentially convey something or foreshadow something? Or it's something that I really noticed in some particular scenes in the beginning. I don't want to go too deep into the details, but was that intentional or was that just a shading thing? I don't know how detailed you can maybe be on that.
So
trying to,
yeah, he's got like this scar on his kind of top lip. So it's almost like a kind of like cleft palate type thing, but it's more like a scar. So yeah, that's conventional from a character design point of view. But again, I think like with Jackal, it's he's almost featureless in a lot of ways, apart from the kind of eyes that are hidden, so like trying to hide that. But then there's just that little glimpse at something there that is like a battle scar because of all these missions that he's been on. He's just like got this fatigue from just being in the field all the time. The hack where it's identifiable that it's not just kind of smooth skin like featureless person. It's got to have something there that's an indicator of the type of person that is underneath that.
I will say that these were choices that, again, the direction that we gave for just in design was largely conceptual, and he kind of brought all of these cool details to it. And the way I've always read that scar visually was that each panel that you see it kind of makes the face a little bit like fragmented, right? Which is just kind of a cool way of looking at Jack. Like there is this sort of split in him right down the middle, and it begs a question of like, what is the rest of Jackal's body look? Where are there some other sorts that show? But I've always just loved that because there's almost a sort of Picasso quality to it. Like, these different sort of fragmented dimensions to one character. And that was, again, anytime these designs would come through, it would both reinforce what we sort of already knew about the character and then also tell us something new. And an extraordinary gift as a writer, and something that in my life, writing for film and television, I rarely get to do, because so doing is kind of working in the development process where the only people weighing in are studio executives and network executives. That's not to say wrong or bad people, but it's very nice to be able to have a sort of a fellow artist interpret your work. It tells more about your work that you would otherwise be able to know.
I would say it adds so much to the way it reads too, because it makes, the first thing I thought of was like, man, what a badass, like look at this guy and what was going on, and I had some ideas going and they didn't end up go, so it was awesome. I love when that happens, when you can't really predict where the story or or what's going to happen. Like you have where something is going, and it what completely is different. That's just one of the things that I love about visual medium of comics in general. How visually it's saying one thing, but the story kind of goes in a different direction.
Issue 3 is all is Jackal's perspective, so we'll make sure to get that over to you ahead of time as well, so you can check it out.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Now, speaking of perspectives, death and hell are a very universal worldwide concept, right? Have you considered any other hell-like creatures or characters from all over the globe, whether it's from different types of religions? Is there anything that you want to sprinkle in just a bit? Because I'll be honest, I did. I can't speak for the other guys. I did 14 years of Catholic school. So reading this, I'm like, yay, I know some of this. I understand some of this. That's kind of fun. Sorry, Father.
I think John, like, to be fair, gets a lot of the credit for like the last splash page of the first issue, which is like the sort of like you see all the little angels, and he's done like we've gotten a lot of credit for like I love that you got the denominational and you guys are spreading it out, but like John's kind of done a lot of the research for us. God bless you. Because wouldn't it be cool if there was a room full of angels and then you get that back and you're like, oh, this is different than what I was expecting. That guy is just eyeballs in a square, which is awesome. But I think a little bit to try and find some different ways to, because we don't want it to be, it's not, I don't think we've at any time a criticism or a conversation about religion. That's not really what the story's about. Like, it's a backdrop and it's an aesthetic, but it's not really making, I think there's a thing about making comments about the similarities between corporations and religion, but I don't think that's directly the point of the story. Probably as far as I think I've thought, so like expanding it beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is like we draw from various mythologies, when appropriate, because there will be sort of in the second issue, we're going to meet Azrael, who is essentially the like personal secretary to the devil, right? And again, Ryan loves it fun for us to just kind of these parallels between sort of corporate culture, which is undeniably hellish, and the actual sort of struggle hell. And so, we chose that based in part just on sort of conceptions and understandings of sort of the mythologies of hell. But, if there is, let's say, another character who serves a different function, there is some kind of I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. It's sort of, we draw characters based on what their utility is, kind of, and that can go across denominations. It can go across different mythologies. Like, it's the same way that in Sandman, or like you're seeing characters not just from heaven and hell theological mythologies, but across different mythologies. We might start to play, right, where are other kind of characters who are being brought in who are different conceptions of deities or demons and things like that.
It's something we said before as well, that the in that first issue where you've got those two splash pages, and that they intentionally have characters in there that are drawn from a wider scope of cultural reference. I think the story, while it has this very big backdrop of the apocalypse and these huge odds, it's about that. It's about drama, and it's far more intimate. So I think setting things up and giving reference to it, not just being this kind of Christian like viewpoint, that it is kind of larger than that, in some ways hopefully dispels it being too much of a commentary on religion, when it's more about kind of family interactions and engagements, and kind of these that we all feel. So the imagery, especially in that first issue, it's I kind of looked at a lot of representations from cultures and tried to draw a lot of stuff in, and a lot of what biblically accurate angels kind of look like.
I want to interject just to quickly shout out John one more time, because you guys have, of course, read the first two issues, and in that final splash page of the first, when you meet the sort of boardroom, the corporate board of the angelic realm, and the guy at the head of it is the angel Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel. And John chose to, I don't even know how, to be perfectly honest, I don't even know how much of the story tracked at this point, or whether or not this was one of the many instances where John's art kind of directed us. But you see that Gabe's wings are covering eyes in this kind of slightly creepy way. Like, so, he's that kind of concealing, and we get the sense that there are sort of ulterior motives even in the angelic realm, and that was brilliant choice from John, and it really dovetailed completely with what we were doing with the character, because at the end of the day, whether it's a demonic presence, an angelic entity, all of these characters who are sort of manipulating humanity to their own ends, like, there's something kind of sinister about that. And so we are going to see as we go through this arc that maybe Gabriel and the angels aren't exactly like them to be.
But if I have my way, you will see the demigod Steamboat Willie in the final issue. So
yeah,
you heard it first, ladies and gentlemen.
He's available.
Yeah. As long as there's an all-out battle with all of them, then I'm totally in.
Well, if you're talking about post-apocalyptic, I mean, yeah, you kind of have to go there. I mean, and that's one great thing too about with John's work with the eyes too, because the eyes usually tell the story of a person. And in this situation, we don't really see the eyes a lot. And that's one thing that adds to the mystery of the story, which, like I say, there's so many different layers to this. It's nothing out there on the comic shops like this right now. Like, we talk about just the elements you can combine, the horror, the humor, the drama. There's just so much into this that, like, honestly, fans need to have this in their collection ASAP.
Yes.
Like, there's literally no exception for them not to have at least one copy in their possession.
None.
Just saying.
Thank you for saying that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Now, this is only slated for 5 issues as of right now, correct?
Yeah, the first arc that we've designed is 5 issues, and hopefully with the support of our readers, we can do a second arc, because we have ideas for sort of extensions of this mythology and further stories that we can tell, and we're starting to build those out now. So I think we'll hopefully be seeing some more in the future.
Is this also going to get a trade eventually after we get issue 5?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Excellent. But you don't want to wait until then. Trust me, when you hear the sound of my voice, wherever you're watching, listening to this, the Infernals is truly something special. When you pick it up, you're going to get vibes of like old school mature readers stories, but it feels modern. It doesn't feel dated. The artwork is going to blow you away. The story is just, like I say, multi-layered. You never know what's going to happen on each page, and there's going to be something to take away from each issue moving forward. Issue 1 is out right now at the shops. Issue 2 is coming very, very shortly. You want to make sure you're running to your comic shops, making sure that it is in your pull list. Make sure you have the pre-orders in, and make sure you have multiple copies, because this will be one not to miss. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us. We definitely have to recap with it when the series is first arc is done.
Awesome.
Absolutely,
man. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Anytime. The contact information for Noah, Ryan, and John is in the liner notes with this episode, and also comicshoplocator.com, because like we insisting, you need to go out, you need to go buy multiple issues of this. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. I want to thank my team, Tom and Marty, for stopping by and having this interview. And my name is Ken M. Whenever you have a great issue in your hands, such as the Infernals by Image Comics, and you see somebody at the shop struggling to find something, hand yours off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next time.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. 'Cause anyone who's worth a damn be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this plot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to blow the moon on the open fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me, we don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know.